Hello everyone, we are Group 5 and we will be discussing Exercise 7, Toad External Anatomy. The objectives of the experiment are: number 1, describe the histology of the frog's or toad's skin. 2, identify the external orientations of a toad. 3, identify the external structures in the toad.
On the screen, you can see the skin cell of a toad under the microscope. We will identify the different parts. First, the chromatophore. The chromatophore contains pigmentation cells, which allows for changing of color according to the environment. Second, the mucous gland. The mucous gland is responsible for keeping the skin moist, maintaining water balance, protection against bacteria, and facilitating the necessary gas exchanges. Third, the epidermis. The epidermis contains immune cells to withstand various attacks from various pathogens and sense the environment. Fourth, the stratum spongiosum contains mostly the pigment cells, blood vessels, and different glands like the poison and mucous glands. Lastly, the stratum compactum. The stratum compactum is made of collagenous fibers.
For the second part, we will discuss the toad's external anatomy. From the photo, we can observe that a frog has a bilateral symmetry. A bilateral symmetry occurs when an organism's body can be separated by a plane into two equal parts, the left and the right. Now, we will be labeling and defining the external anatomy of the toad. The first arrow points to the external nares. It is a pointed snout located at the most anterior portion of the head, responsible for the entry and exit of air in the frog's body. The second arrow points to the bulging eyes, giving the frogs the ability to see within 180 degrees. The next arrow points to the tympanic membrane or the eardrum, allowing frogs to hear both on land and underwater. Next, the fourth arrow pointing behind the tympanic membrane is the parotoid or the poison gland. This gland contains toxins when a frog is under stress and can lead to illness or death when ingested. The external nares, eyes, tympanic membrane, and poison gland comprises the head and the trunk of the frog, which is the axial region. Moving on, the fifth arrow pertains to the upper arm, while the sixth arrow points at the forearm. These two structures make up the forelimbs of the appendicular region. On the other hand, the remaining structures make up the hind limbs of the appendicular region. The seventh arrow pertains to the thigh. The next arrow is the shank or crus, which helps the frog to move. The ninth arrow is the foot or pes. And lastly, the digits. The digits can be found both in the forelimb and the hind limb, however, they differ in structure. There are 4 digits in the forelimb, whereas there are 5 webbed digits in the hind limb.
To determine the sex of the toad, we can start by examining its external characteristics. If the toad is a male, the skin on the ventral side of the head near the angles of the jaw has a distinct dark pigmentation due to concentration of pigments. The thumb pads of the toad's inner fingers are enlarged or swollen. These are used during amplexus or false copulation, wherein the male toad latches on the back of the female toad to mate. Furthermore, sexually mature male frogs are generally smaller than female. On the other hand, if the toad is female, the pigments are diffused. Hence, there is no distinct pigmentation at this area. The thumb pads of the female toad's inner fingers are not swollen, and female toads are larger in size. Apart from that, a female toad's tympanic membrane is smaller and has lighter pigmentation than that of the male toads. Guide questions. Of what significance is the difference in color of the dorsal and ventral surfaces of the body? What is the protective advantage of this if the predator approaches a swimming bullfrog or toad from above or from below? The dorsal surface of the toad's body has a darker tone of green with some dark brown spots, whereas the ventral surface is light green and sometimes pale white. The rough dorsal surface, together with its dark green and dark brown pigmentation, might look like another unassuming leaf or wood, which will allow the toad to improve camouflage from above. The ventral surface of the toad is lighter in color so that the toad can be disguised against the light sky from down below. Number 2. What is the sex of your specimen based on its external features? Why do you say so? The sex of the specimen is male since its skin is rough and has a yellowish hue, and the toad's tympanic membrane is bigger and darker than that of a female toad. So that concludes our discussion for exercise 7. Thank you for listening.